This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. Recording by Andy Minter. Some Experiences of an Irish R.M. by Edith Inoni Somerville and Martin Ross. Chapter 12. O Love, O Fire. It was on one of the hottest days of a hot August that I walked over to Tory Lodge to inform Mr. Flurry Knox, M.F.H., that the limits of human endurance had been reached, and that either Venus and her family, or I and mine, must quit Shrille Lane. In a moment of impulse I had accepted her and her numerous progeny as guests in my stable yard, since when Mrs. Cadogan had given warning once or twice a week, and Maria, lawful autocrat of the Ashpit, had, I quote the kitchen maid, "tin battles for every male she'd ate." The walk over the hills was not of a nature to lower the temperature, moral or otherwise. The grassy path was as slippery as glass, the rocks radiated heat, the bracken radiated horseflies. There was no need to nurse my wrath to keep it warm. I found Flurry seated in the kennel yard in a long and unclean white linen coat, engaged in clipping hieroglyphics on the ears of a young outgoing draught, an occupation in itself unfavourable to argument. The young draught had already monopolised all possible forms of remonstrance, from snarling in the obscurity behind the meal sack in the boiler house to hysterical yelling as they were dragged forth by the tail. But through these alarms and excursions I denounced Venus and all her works, from slaughtered Wyandottes to broken dishes. Even as I did so, I was conscious of something chastened in Mr. Knox's demeanour, some touch of remoteness and melancholy with which I was quite unfamiliar. My indictment weakened, and my grievances became trivial when laid before this grave and almost religiously gentle young man. "I'm sorry you and Mrs. Yates should be vexed by her. Send her back when you like. I'll keep her. Maybe it'll not be for so long after all." When pressed to expound this dark saying, Flurry smiled wanly and snipped a second line in the hair of the puppy that was pinned between his legs. I was almost relieved when a hard try to bite on the part of the puppy imparted to Flurry's language a transient warmth, but the reaction was only temporary. "It'd be as good for me to make a present of this lot to old Welby as to take the price he's offering me," he went on as he got up and took off his highly scented kennel coat. "But I couldn't be bothered fighting him. Come on in and have something. I drink tea myself at this hour." If he had said toast and water, it would have seemed no more than was suitable to such a frame of mind. As I followed him to the house, I thought that when the day came that Flurry Knox could not be bothered with fighting old Welby, things were becoming serious. But I kept this opinion to myself, and merely offered an admiring comment on the roses that were blooming on the front of the house. "I put up every stick of that trellis myself with my own hands," said Flurry, still gloomily. "The roses were trailing all over the place for the want of it. Would you like to have a look at the garden while they're getting tea? I settled it up a bit since you saw it last." I acceded to this almost alarmingly ladylike suggestion, marvelling greatly. Flurry certainly was a changed man, and his garden was a changed garden. It was a very old garden, with unexpected arbours madly overgrown with flowering climbers, and a flight of grey steps leading to a terrace, where a moss-grown sundial and ancient herbaceous plants strove with nettles and briars. But I chiefly remembered it as a place where washing was wont to hang on black-currant bushes, and the kennel terrier matured his bones and hunted chickens. There was now rabbit wire on the gate, the walks were cleaned, the beds weeded. There was even a bed of mignonette, a row of sweet pea, and a blazing party of sunflowers. And Michael, once second in command in many a filibustering expedition, was now on his knees, ingloriously tying carnations to little pieces of cane. We walked up the steps to the terrace. Down below us the rich and southern blue of the sea filled the gaps between scattered fir trees. The hillside above was purple with heather, A bay mare and her foal were moving lazily through the bracken, with the sun glistening on it and them. I looked back at the house nestling in the hollow of the hill. I smelt the smell of the mignonette in the air. I regarded Michael's labouring back among the carnations, and, without any connection of ideas, I seemed to see Miss Sally Knox, with her golden red hair and slight figure, standing on the terrace beside her kinsman. "Michael, do you know where's Mr. Flurry?" squalled a voice from the garden gate, the untrammelled voice of the female domestic, at large among her fellows. "The tay's wet, and there's a man over with a message from Arcellus. He was telling me the old hero beyond has given out invitations." A stricken silence fell, induced no doubt by hasty danger signals from Michael. "Who's the old hero beyond?" I asked, as we turned towards the house. "My grandmother," said Flurry, permitting himself a smile that had about as much sociability in it as skim milk. "She's given a tenants' dance at Orsolas. She gave one about 5 years ago, and I declare you might as well get the influenza into the country, or a mission at the chapel. There won't be a servant in the place who'll be able to answer their name for a week after it, what with toothache and headache and blathering in the kitchen." We had tea in the drawing-room, a solemnity which I could not but be aware was due to the presence of a new carpet, a new wallpaper, and a new piano. Flurry made no comment on these things, but something told me that I was expected to do so, and I did. "I'd sell you the lot tomorrow for half what I gave for them," said my host, eyeing them with morose respect as he poured out his third cup of tea. I have all my life been handicapped by not having the courage of my curiosity. Those who have the nerve to ask direct questions on matters that do not concern them seldom fail to extract direct answers; but in my lack of this enviable gift I went home in the dark as to what had befallen my landlord, and fully aware of how my wife would despise me for my shortcomings. Philippa always says that she never asks questions, but she seems none the less to get a lot of answers. On my own avenue I met Miss Sally Knox riding away from the house on her white cob. She had found no one at home, and she would not turn back with me, but she did not seem to be in any hurry to ride away. I told her that I had just been over to see her relative, Mr. Knox, who had informed me that he meant to give up the hounds, a fact in which she seemed only conventionally interested. She looked pale, and her eyelids were slightly pink. I checked myself on the verge of asking her if she had hay fever, and inquired instead if she had heard of the tenants' dance at Orsolas. She did not answer at first, but rubbed her cane up and down the cob's clipped toothbrush of a mane. Then she said: "Major Yates, look here, there's a most awful row at home." I expressed incoherent regret, and wished to my heart that Philippa had been there to cope with the situation. "It began when mamma found out about Flurry's racing Sultan, and then came our dance." Miss Sally stopped. I nodded, remembering certain episodes of Lady Knox's dance. "And mamma says she says..." I waited respectfully to hear what mamma had said. The cob fidgeted under the attentions of the horseflies, and nearly trod on my toe. "Well, the end of it is," she said, with a gulp, "she said such things to Flurry that he can't come near the house again, and I'm to go over to England to Aunt Dora next week. Will you tell Philippa that I came to say good bye to her? I don't think I can get over here again." Miss Sally was a sufficiently old friend of mine for me to take her hand and press it in a fatherly manner; but for the life of me I could not think of anything to say, unless I expressed my sympathy with her mother's point of view about detrimentals, which was obviously not the thing to do. Philippa accorded to my news the rare tribute of speechless attention, and then was despicable enough to say that she had foreseen the whole affair from the beginning. "From the day that she refused him in the ice house, I suppose?" said I sarcastically. "That was the beginning," replied Philippa. "Well," I went on judiciously, "whenever it began, it was high time for it to end. She can do a good deal better than Flurry." Philippa became rather red in the face. "I call that a thoroughly commonplace thing to say.